Tears fell as she spoke her vows until the tribal chief whispered, "One day you'll laugh again." The first light of dawn stretched across the endless plains, painting the horizon in soft shades of gold and rose. A gentle wind swept over the grass, carrying the scent of sage and wildflowers, a perfume of the land that had witnessed generations before. In the heart of the Lakota village, near the edge of a quiet river, a young woman stood alone. Her name was Ahioka, which meant she brought happiness, though today happiness felt far away. Ahioka's hands trembled slightly as she held the edge of her ceremonial shawl. The cloth was soft, patterned with symbols passed down from her ancestors, each stitch telling a story older than the trees surrounding her. Today she was to speak her vows to the tribe, not a vow of marriage, but a vow of promise. A promise to her people, to the land, and to the spirits of her ancestors. Her heart was heavy. It had been months since her mother's laughter had filled the lodge, months since she had felt the warmth of her father's hand guiding her along the sacred paths. Grief had crept into her life like a quiet shadow, stretching across her days and coloring even the brightest sunlight with sorrow. She had learned to hide it in small ways with polite smiles and nods, but now, standing before the council and the elders, she could no longer hold it back. The village had begun to gather in the soft morning light. Children's laughter floated in the distance as they chased each other around the campfire, their small feet pressing the earth with joy. Elders moved slowly, leaning on carved wooden staffs, their eyes reflecting wisdom and the memories of many seasons. Women and men prepared offerings of corn, berries, and sweetgrass, arranging them with careful hands as if each grain carried a prayer. The air was alive with ritual, with meaning. Yet Ahioka felt only the weight of her own heart. She took a deep breath, inhaling the familiar scents of her home. The wind whispered through the tall grass as if urging her forward. Today was the day she would speak, and there was no turning back. Ahioka remembered her mother's voice, soft yet firm, telling her that words carried power. "Speak from the heart, Ahioka," she had said. "Even if your voice shakes, your truth will reach the spirits." Her mother had always believed that sorrow and strength could coexist, that grief could be a bridge rather than a barrier. But standing here now, the sorrow felt like a river too wide to cross, and the strength she remembered seemed distant, almost unreachable. The village quieted as she approached the circle where the elders and the chief waited. The chief, Wikasa, was a man whose presence seemed to belong to the wind itself. His hair was streaked with silver, his eyes deep and steady, holding the wisdom of countless seasons. Ahioka had known him since she was a girl, watching him speak to the river, the trees, and the stars as if they were old friends. His voice, when he chose to use it, was gentle but filled with authority, the kind that made even the restless wind pause. Ahioka knelt before the council, bowing her head respectfully. Her shawl fell around her like a protective cocoon, yet it could not shield her from the storm within. She closed her eyes, drawing in the air of the morning, letting it fill her lungs. She tried to steady her voice, but when she began to speak, it came out as a whisper, fragile and trembling. "I speak today with a heart full of memories," she began, her voice quivering, "and a heart heavy with the absence of those I love. I promise to honor the spirits of my family, to carry their teachings in my steps, and to walk the path of our people with respect and care." Her words faltered, and her breath hitched as tears welled in her eyes. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold them back, but the emotions she had carried for months surged forward. Memories of her mother teaching her how to weave, her father guiding her through the sacred dances, and the laughter of siblings now gone, all crowded into her mind at once. Ahioka's voice broke. I I cannot forget the love I have lost. I cannot forget the joy that once filled my days. But I will try to live as they would have wanted me to, with honor, with care, and with a heart open to the spirits around me. The circle was silent, Even the wind seemed to pause, listening. She felt every gaze upon her, each pair of eyes reflecting understanding rather than judgment. The elders nodded slowly, some with eyes glistening, and the children peered curiously from the edge of the circle, sensing the depth of what was being shared. Ahioka's knees ached from kneeling, and her arms felt heavy, but she did not move. She let the tears fall freely now, letting the grief wash over her like a cleansing rain. For a moment, she feared that speaking her heart aloud would break something inside her irreparably, but instead it seemed to release a small, fragile weight. From the edge of the circle, Chief Wakasa shifted forward. He did not speak immediately. He simply observed, his eyes kind and patient. The corners of his mouth lifted slightly, a gesture of encouragement. He waited for the woman to find her rhythm, to find her voice in the midst of the sorrow. Ahioka's words became steadier, more confident as she continued. I vow to plant seeds of respect for our land, to honor the water that gives life, and to carry the stories of our ancestors to the children who will one day walk these plains. I vow to be gentle with my heart, even when it is heavy, and to allow the spirits to guide me toward light once more. Her voice grew stronger, steadier, though tears still shone on her cheeks. There was a rhythm now, a cadence that echoed across the plains. Birds sang from the trees as if joining in her prayer, and the river nearby murmured softly, a constant reminder of life flowing, unending and patient. As she spoke, Ahioka felt a presence beside her, a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. She looked up briefly and saw the chief standing quietly, close enough that his shadow fell across her shawl. His eyes met hers, and in that gaze, she felt something she had not felt in a long time: hope. He did not interrupt, did not offer words of comfort. He simply nodded, a gesture of recognition. The simple act, the acknowledgement that her grief was seen and honored, touched her deeply. It reminded her that she was not alone, that the spirits of her ancestors, the land, and her people were with her. When Ahioka finally finished, her voice soft but clear, the circle remained silent for a heartbeat. Then, slowly, the elders began to murmur blessings. Words of encouragement floated across the air, carrying meaning and tradition. Children clapped softly, their laughter shy but genuine, as if celebrating her courage. Ahioka's tears were still present, but they were no longer only a sign of sorrow. They were a sign of strength, of the bravery it took to face grief openly and honestly. She took a deep breath, feeling the cool morning air fill her lungs, and for the first time in months she felt the faintest trace of peace. Chief Wakasa stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. One day you'll laugh again, he whispered, not as a command, but as a promise. Ahioka blinked, startled by the gentleness of the words. The sorrow in her chest did not vanish, but the chief's whisper planted a seed of hope that would grow slowly, like the first green shoots of spring after a long winter. She nodded slightly, a small smile brushing her lips. It was fragile and faint, but it was a start. As the sun climbed higher, illuminating the village in warm light, Ahioka felt a subtle shift within herself. Today, she had faced her grief openly, spoken her vows with honesty, and felt seen by the people who mattered most. The path ahead was still uncertain, and the shadows of loss would remain. But for the first time, she believed in the possibility of joy once more. The wind swept over the plains again, rustling the grass and carrying the scent of sage to the farthest corners of the land. Ahioka lifted her face to the breeze, allowing it to brush against her cheeks and through her hair. She closed her eyes, feeling connected to the land, to her ancestors, and to the promise of life continuing despite sorrow. And in that quiet, sacred moment, the weight of the past began to feel lighter. Not gone, not forgotten, but lighter. Ahioka took another breath, deeper this time, and whispered a vow to herself. I will find laughter again. I will allow my heart to heal, one step at a time. The chief watched from a distance, knowing that the first step had been taken. The journey of healing was never simple, but it had begun. And in the heart of the plains, surrounded by her people, Ahioka finally felt the faintest touch of hope, a fragile yet undeniable promise that even after tears fall, joy can return. The sun had risen fully now, spilling golden light over the rolling plains. The wind danced through the tall grasses, carrying the earthy scent of the land and the faint perfume of wildflowers. Ahioka walked slowly along the familiar paths of the village, her shawl still draped over her shoulders, the memory of her vows and the chief's whisper lingering in her mind. The words had been simple, almost casual in their softness. "One day you'll laugh again. You came to the river," he said quietly, kneeling beside her. "It is a good place for reflection. The water teaches us that even when life seems heavy, there is a flow we can follow." Ahioka nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I want to laugh again, Wakasa. I want to feel joy, but it seems impossible." The chief studied her for a moment, his eyes patient and kind. "Joy is not always found in grand events or loud celebrations," he said. "Sometimes it begins in small moments, listening to the wind, feeling the sun on your face, watching a child discover the world for the first time. You will find laughter, but first, you must open your heart to the little joys around you." Ahioka considered his words, letting them sink in. She had been so focused on the absence of those she loved, so consumed by what she had lost, that she had forgotten the present moment entirely. She looked at the river again, noticing the way the sunlight danced on the ripples, the way the water sparkled as if smiling back at her. She let out a soft, almost hesitant laugh, a sound that surprised her with its lightness. The chief nodded approvingly. "That is the beginning," he said. "Even a single moment of lightness can grow if we nurture it. Our ancestors taught us that joy and sorrow exist together, like the sun and moon sharing the same sky." Ahioka smiled faintly, feeling warmth creep into her chest. She realized that the chief's presence itself was comforting. He did not demand that she forget her grief. He simply showed her the possibility of balance. Over the next days, the chief guided Ioka in simple rituals and practices that had been passed down for generations. Each morning, they would walk through the plains, letting the rhythm of their steps match the heartbeat of the earth. The chief would point out plants and stones, telling stories of their significance, of how the spirits had used them to teach lessons to those who were willing to listen. One morning, they paused by a grove of cottonwood trees. The leaves shimmered in the sunlight, and the chief gestured for Ahioka to place her hands against the rough bark. "The trees remember," he said softly. "They hold the stories of those who came before, and they are patient with those who seek guidance. Listen carefully, and you may hear what your heart needs." Ahioka closed her eyes, pressing her hands gently against the tree. She let herself breathe deeply, feeling the solid strength beneath her palms. Slowly, memories of her childhood emerged. Not only the moments of grief, but also the laughter, the games with siblings, the songs her mother had taught her. Tears fell again, but they were different this time, less heavy, more cleansing. "The past is a part of you," the chief said, observing her quietly. "It shapes your path, but it does not define every step you take from this day forward. When you remember both joy and sorrow, you honor the whole of your journey." Ahioka nodded, feeling a gentle shift within herself. Each day brought small moments of discovery. The sight of a butterfly landing delicately on a flower, the laughter of children chasing a rolling ball across the grass, the sweet taste of berries she helped gather from the bushes. These were simple things, yet each one carried a spark of light, a reminder that life continued and that joy could be found in unexpected places. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in deep oranges and purples, Ahioka sat with the chief near the fire circle. The flames flickered, casting dancing shadows on the ground, and the scent of burning sage filled the air. "You have come far in a short time," the chief said, his voice quiet but firm. "The sorrow will not vanish, but you are learning to carry it with grace rather than letting it weigh you down." Ahioka smiled softly. "I still feel the emptiness sometimes, but I also notice the little things, the beauty in the wind, the warmth of the sun. I think, I think I am ready to try to laugh again." The chief's eyes twinkled with approval. "Then you are on the right path. Laughter is not just a sound. It is a release, a gift, and a sign that your spirit is alive and free. Do not rush it. Let it come naturally, like the river flowing over the stones." That night, as Ahioka lay beneath the wide sky, she listened to the whispers of the wind through the grass. The stars above shimmered like scattered gems, and she felt the gentle pulse of the earth beneath her. For the first time in many moons, she allowed herself to imagine a future filled not only with memory and loss, but also with laughter, hope, and renewal. The chief's words echoed in her mind. "One day you'll laugh again." They were no longer just words. They had become a promise, planted firmly in her heart, waiting for the right moment to bloom. In the following weeks, Ahioka's life began to change in subtle but meaningful ways. She helped the elders with weaving, learning not just the craft but the stories and history woven into each pattern. She joined children in the village for games and songs, letting their energy lift her spirit. She spoke more openly with the chief, sharing her thoughts, fears, and small victories. Each conversation left her feeling lighter, more connected, and more alive. Ahioka began to understand that healing was not a sudden event, but a series of moments, small sparks of light that could grow if nurtured. She realized that joy and grief could coexist, that tears could fall alongside laughter, and that the love she had lost was not gone. It lived on in her memory, her actions, and the stories she carried. One morning, as the sun rose over the plains, Ahioka and the chief walked together to the river once more. The water shimmered, reflecting the sky above. Ahioka paused, letting the wind brush against her face, and laughed, a sound soft at first, but clear and genuine. It startled her, the way it felt like a gift she had almost forgotten she could receive. The chief smiled, his eyes reflecting pride and warmth. "That is the sound of a heart opening," he said. "It is only the beginning, but it is a beginning worth honoring." Bahioka nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She knew the journey was far from over, but for the first time she believed in the possibility of joy again. The plains stretched before her, wide and welcoming, carrying the promise of many days filled with hope, laughter, and the gentle guidance of those who loved and understood her. And so, under the vast sky and beside the steady flow of the river, Ahioka took her first real steps toward healing, each one lighter than the last, carrying with her the chief's whisper and the knowledge that laughter, though delayed, could return. The wind over the plains had grown warmer, carrying the soft scents of spring. Ahioka walked barefoot along the grassy paths, feeling the earth beneath her feet, steady and real. Each step felt like a small act of courage, a quiet rebellion against the weight she had carried for so long. The chief's words, "One day you'll laugh again," echoed in her mind, steady as the river she had come to know so well. Since that morning by the river, Ahioka had begun to notice the small joys in life again. She had laughed softly with children as they chased butterflies through the fields. She had learned the rhythm of the weaving loom with the elders, their stories intertwining with each thread. The sorrow in her heart had not disappeared, but it no longer dictated every moment. One morning, as the sun began to rise over the horizon, Ahioka joined the chief for a walk through the meadows beyond the village. Dew clung to the grass, sparkling like tiny stars in the soft light. The chief did not speak immediately. Instead, they walked in silence, letting the rhythm of their footsteps match the quiet pulse of the earth. After a while, he spoke. "The heart is like the land, Ahioka," he said. It may feel barren after a storm, but beneath the surface, seeds of life are waiting. You cannot force them to grow, but you can nurture them with care and patience. Ahioka listened, letting his words sink deep. She thought of her grief, of the loss that had shaped her. For so long she had buried herself in sadness, believing that laughter and joy were lost to her forever. Now she began to understand that the seeds of happiness had always been there. They were simply waiting for her attention. The chief stopped near a cluster of wildflowers swaying gently in the breeze. "See these flowers?" he asked. "They bloom not because of anything extraordinary, but because they are nurtured by sunlight, rain, and the steady earth. Your spirit is the same. Even the smallest act of hope can bring forth growth." Ahioka reached out to touch the petals, feeling their soft texture against her fingers. A warmth spread through her chest, a gentle reminder that life could be gentle and kind even after sorrow. She smiled faintly, feeling the first true lightness in her heart in many moons. In the days that followed, Ahioka began to spend more time among the people of her village. She helped the elders gather herbs, learning the stories and uses of each plant. She listened to the children's songs, allowing their laughter to wash over her like sunlight on the plains. She shared her own stories, speaking of her memories and dreams, of her love for her family, and the sorrow she had carried. The tribe accepted her presence with warmth, not pity. They understood that grief was part of life, but so was healing. Hayoka felt the bond of community weaving around her, comforting and steady. She discovered that joy could exist alongside sorrow, that laughter did not erase memory, but honored it. One afternoon, the chief led her to a small grove of cottonwood trees near the riverbank. The leaves shimmered in the sunlight, creating a delicate dance of shadow and light. He gestured for Ayoka to sit against the largest tree, its bark rough and grounding beneath her hands. "Close your eyes," he said. "Listen to the world around you. The wind, the river, the trees, they all have stories to tell. If you open your heart, you may hear the laughter that has been waiting for you." Ahayoka obeyed, letting the sounds of nature fill her senses. The water rippled gently over the stones, birds sang in the branches above, and the leaves whispered in the breeze. Slowly, a memory emerged. A bright morning from her childhood, when her mother had taught her a song and she had laughed so freely that her father had joined in, dancing across the grass. She could almost feel that joy again, fleeting but alive, and it made her chest ache in the best way. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But these were not tears of sorrow. They were tears of release. She felt her heart stretching, making space for the light she had once feared would never return. "The past is not a chain, Ahioka," the chief said softly. "It is a guide. Carry it with care, but do not let it prevent you from stepping forward." Ahioka opened her eyes and nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She understood that healing was not a straight path. It was a journey of small steps, of noticing beauty in unexpected places, of allowing herself to feel without judgment. Over the next weeks, she continued to explore the world around her with renewed curiosity. She helped the children build small shelters from branches and leaves, letting their imagination guide the shapes. She learned songs from the elders, their voices carrying the wisdom of generations. She spent quiet moments by the river, watching the water flow and realizing that life, like the river, moved steadily forward, carrying both joy and sorrow in its current. One morning, she awoke to the sound of laughter. She followed it and found a group of children chasing a rolling ball across the meadow. She joined them hesitantly at first, her laughter soft and shy, but soon it grew brighter, mixing with theirs in a joyful chorus. For the first time in months, she felt completely present in the moment, unburdened by grief. The chief observed from a distance, his expression calm but full of pride. He knew that true healing required more than words. It required experience, connection, and the willingness to embrace life fully. Ahioka was learning to do all of these, step by step. One evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and lavender, the chief and Ahioka sat together by the river. She had brought a small bundle of herbs she had collected, carefully arranging them in patterns she had learned from the elders. "You have grown," the chief said, his voice gentle, "not because the sorrow has vanished, but because you have learned to walk with it. You have made space for joy, for laughter, for hope. That is true strength." Ahyoka smiled, a smile that felt natural and light. "I still feel the sorrow," she admitted, "but it does not feel as heavy. I can see the beauty around me, the life in the village, and the love in the people here. I think, I think I am beginning to understand what you meant." The chief nodded, his eyes reflecting the last rays of the sun. Healing is a journey without a set path. Some days are easier than others. Some days the sorrow will feel closer than the laughter. But remember this: even the smallest spark of joy can grow into a flame that warms your heart and the hearts of those around you. Ahioka looked out over the river, the water shimmering in the fading light. She felt the truth of his words. Her heart was not free from grief, but it had space now for hope, curiosity, and lightness. She felt the gentle rhythm of life returning to her, like the first soft steps of spring after a long winter. In the following days, Ahioka began to create small rituals for herself. She would wake before sunrise and walk along the river, greeting the water and listening to its song. She would help the elders in the village, learning new skills and listening to their stories. She would spend time with the children, their energy and curiosity reminding her of the joy that still existed in the world. Each day brought new moments of laughter, soft, spontaneous, sometimes quiet, sometimes shared with others. And each moment made her heart feel lighter, like the weight of sorrow was slowly being lifted by the gentle breeze of hope. One evening, after helping a child catch a butterfly that had landed on her hand, Ahioka sat by the river alone. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving a sky painted with deep purples and golds. She closed her eyes and let the wind brush against her face, feeling the presence of the chief's guidance, the warmth of her tribe, and the memories of her family. She allowed herself to laugh softly, a sound that felt like a promise to her own heart. It was the beginning of something new, a recognition that even after sorrow, there was room for joy. And in that quiet moment, she made a vow to herself: "I will carry the laughter, the joy, and the love I feel now into every day, no matter what comes." The chief appeared quietly beside her, his eyes reflecting the dim light of evening. He said nothing, only sat and allowed her presence to fill the space. Together they listened to the river, to the wind, to the quiet songs of the night, and for the first time in many months, Ahioka felt truly at peace, her heart open to the beauty of life once more. The plains stretched endlessly before her, vast and welcoming. The stars began to twinkle above, a reminder of the ancestors who had watched over her. Ahioka smiled, feeling the gentle weight of their presence. She knew the journey of healing was not over, but she also knew that she was no longer walking it alone. With the chief's guidance, the support of her tribe, and the quiet strength she had found within herself, Ahioka understood that laughter and sorrow could exist side by side. She had begun to carry both with grace, and in that balance, she discovered the first real taste of freedom and joy. And as the night settled over the plains, Ahioka closed her eyes, breathing in the cool air, listening to the whispers of the wind, and letting her heart fill with the gentle, steady rhythm of life and the promise of many more moments of laughter to come. The sky stretched wide above the plains, painted in soft hues of pink and gold as the morning sun rose. The wind whispered across the grass, carrying the gentle scent of wildflowers and sage. Hyoka walked along the familiar paths of the village, her heart lighter than it had been in many moons. Today felt different. There was a subtle energy in the air, as if the land itself was inviting her to embrace life fully. For weeks, she had been learning to notice the small joys, the gentle gifts that often went unnoticed. She had watched the children play, helped the elders with weaving and storytelling, and spent quiet hours by the river listening to its constant song. Each step, each breath had brought her closer to herself and to the possibility of laughter again. Today, the village had gathered for a communal celebration of the land and the changing season. Children ran between the adults, their laughter bright and infectious. Elders arranged food and offerings, their hands steady and precise. Smoke from the fire spiraled into the sky, carrying prayers and stories upward. The atmosphere was full of life, warmth, and connection. Ahioka felt a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. She had never attended a gathering like this while carrying her heart so openly before. Chief Wakasa appeared beside her, his presence calm and reassuring. He nodded toward the circle where the villagers were gathering. "Today is a day for both remembrance and joy," he said softly. "Walk among your people. Share your stories, your smiles, your laughter. Let yourself be present." Ahioka nodded, her heart pounding slightly. She took a deep breath and stepped forward into the circle. The children noticed her first, waving and calling her name. She smiled, and in that moment, a small spark of lightness stirred within her chest. She knelt to greet them, their small hands reaching for hers, their laughter wrapping around her like a gentle wind. As the morning unfolded, Ahioka found herself swept into the rhythm of the celebration. She listened to the elders recount stories of ancestors, their voices carrying wisdom and warmth. She helped with preparing berries and corn, laughing softly when a child's hand accidentally knocked over a basket. She joined in singing, letting the music fill her body, feeling the pulse of the drums beneath her feet. Each moment brought her closer to something she had almost forgotten: the simple, unforced joy of being alive. The laughter of the children, the song of the birds, the ripple of the river, the warmth of the sun, all of it reminded her that life continued and that joy could coexist with sorrow. During a break in the activities, Ahioka wandered to the edge of the river. She knelt by the water, dipping her fingers into the cool, clear flow. The reflection of the sky shimmered on the surface, and for a moment, she let herself imagine her mother's smile, her father's steady gaze, the sound of her siblings laughing. She did not close herself off from the memory. She embraced it. It was a part of her, and it was beautiful. Chief Wakasa approached quietly, standing beside her. "You are ready," he said softly. "Today is the day you may find the laughter that belongs to you." Ahioka looked at him, her eyes wide. "I think I feel it already," she whispered. "It is like a seed I have been watering for a long time." The chief smiled. "Then let it bloom. Let it flow naturally without fear or hesitation. Joy is patient, but it is always ready to return." As the sun climbed higher, Ahioka returned to the circle. A group of children were building a small fort with branches and leaves. They invited her to join, and she laughed, a soft, clear sound that surprised even her. She felt the tension in her chest ease as she joined their game, helping to balance the branches and lifting a corner of the shelter when it wobbled. The children's laughter mingled with hers, creating a melody that carried across the meadow. Ahioka realized with wonder that she had not laughed like this in months, perhaps even years. The sound was freeing, light, and real. She laughed not to forget her sorrow, but to honor the joy that had returned to her life. Elders watched from nearby, nodding with approval. They understood that this moment was more than play. It was a sign of healing, a sign that the young woman had embraced her place among them fully. Even the adults smiled, drawn to the warmth of her energy and the gentle courage it represented. After a while, the chief approached her again, gesturing for her to stand. He led her to the center of the circle, where the villagers had gathered for storytelling. "Share your voice, he encouraged. She closed her eyes and let the memories of the morning wash over her. The laughter of the children, the gentle words of the chief, the stories she had shared. Her heart swelled with gratitude for the people who had helped her heal, for the land that had always been patient with her, and for the laughter that had returned to her life. "Thank you," she whispered softly to the wind. "Thank you for letting me find joy again." The chief appeared beside her, his presence calm and steady. "You have done the work, Ahioka," he said. "You have embraced both sorrow and joy, and in doing so, you have honored yourself, your ancestors, and your people. Remember this: laughter is not the absence of grief. It is the courage to embrace life despite it." Ahioka nodded, tears of happiness glistening in her eyes. She had learned that joy and sorrow were not opposites, but companions, both essential, both shaping her journey. And in this understanding, she felt complete. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Ahioka joined the villagers once more. They gathered around the fire, sharing food, songs, and stories. She laughed with them, danced with them, and felt the steady pulse of life in her veins. She realized that her grief had transformed, not disappeared, but woven into her heart in a way that allowed light and laughter to coexist. The chief watched from the edge of the circle, his eyes soft with pride. He knew that the young woman had embraced her path fully. She had faced the weight of the past, listened to the wisdom of the land and the people, and allowed her heart to open once more. Her laughter was no longer hesitant or fragile. It was full, real, and resonant. As night fell and the stars began to twinkle overhead, Ahioka stood by the river one last time. She looked at the reflection of the moon shimmering on the water and whispered a vow to herself. "I will carry this joy. I will honor both laughter and sorrow. I will live fully, and I will share my heart freely." The wind rustled through the grass as if in response, and Ahioka laughed softly, the sound clear and warm. She was no longer just a young woman carrying grief. She was a heart that had learned to embrace life again, a spirit open to love, joy, and the quiet beauty of the world around her. And in that moment, under the wide sky and beside the flowing river, Ahioka understood the full meaning of the chief's whisper. One day, you'll laugh again. Today, she had found that laughter, and it would carry her forward, a steady light across the plains, into the days and years to come. Yet they struck her like the first gentle touch of spring after a long, harsh winter. She clutched the shawl around her, trying to hold on to the hope that had sparked within her heart. It felt fragile, like a small flame flickering in a dark room, but it was enough to make her step forward, one foot at a time. She wandered toward the river where the water flowed steadily over smooth stones, singing a quiet, constant song. The river had always been a place of reflection for her. As a child, she had played along its banks, letting the current carry her small boats of bark and leaves, imagining the stories they would tell the spirits. Today, the river called to her in a different way, not for play, but for understanding, for listening. Ahioka knelt at the edge of the water, letting her fingers trail through the cool flow. The ripple of the river seemed to respond as if encouraging her to speak. She closed her eyes and let the wind carry her thoughts, letting the sorrow she had carried for so long float out into the vastness of the plains. "You said I would laugh again," she whispered, her voice trembling but steady. "How do I find that laughter when it feels so far away?" The water lapped gently at her hands, but no answer came, at least not in words. Instead, a calmness settled over her. The river did not rush. It did not demand. It simply flowed, teaching patience, teaching the quiet persistence of life. And in that steady presence, Ahioka felt a glimmer of understanding. Healing, like the river, could not be forced. It must be allowed to move in its own time. Footsteps approached, soft against the earth. Ahioka looked up to see Chief Wakasa walking toward her, his figure tall and calm against the morning light. He carried no staff today, only the weight of his presence, steady and reassuring. His eyes, deep and knowing, met hers, and a gentle smile tugged at his lips. Speak your story and let it carry both sorrow and joy. That is the strength of the heart. Ahayoka took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past lift slightly. She began to tell a story, not one of grief alone, but of life, love, and the lessons she had learned. She spoke of her family, of the moments of sorrow, and of the small joys that had helped her find hope again. She spoke of the river, the trees, and the wind, and how they had taught her patience and strength. As she spoke, the villagers listened, their faces reflecting understanding and compassion. The children giggled at the funny parts, the elders nodded at the wisdom, and the adults smiled at the honesty in her words. And then, as she told a memory of a childhood game with her siblings, she laughed fully, freely, without restraint. The sound was like a bell over the plains, clear and bright. The villagers joined her in laughter, some softly, some with full-hearted joy. The wind seemed to carry the sound across the plains, and even the river's flow seemed to respond, rippling gently as if celebrating alongside them. Ahayoka felt a lightness in her chest she had not known for months. Her heart felt open, alive, and connected to everything around her. The chief watched quietly, a small smile on his face, knowing that this laughter was not only her own, it was a gift she was sharing with the world. As the celebration continued, Ahioka spent time walking among her people. She offered a kind word here, a helping hand there, and each interaction brought new warmth to her heart. She realized that joy was not a solitary experience. It grew when shared, when nurtured, and when acknowledged. By afternoon, the sun had risen high, casting a warm, golden glow over the plains. Ahioka found herself near the river again, sitting on a smooth stone and watching the water sparkle.